through the travels here.
Do you want me to sit by it for you?
Sure, I will accept that assistance, thank you. This will be my sign. And the second, I am on the tail end of the... Oh, Houston. Okay, so I'll try not to scream into this and scare people. And I just didn't want to alarm anyone. I'm on the tail end. I was sick 3 weeks ago. I am not sick now, but occasionally I just cough or some, you know, the cough has remained. So I didn't want to alarm anyone. I've not been to any countries in Africa recently or anything like that. So I just want to make sure everybody knows. Okay, so you do have access to the PowerPoint presentation on the NW's Long Beach website, and I'm honestly less interested or less focused on making it through every single slide as I am making sure to address some of the issues and concerns that you all may have. I am not a clinician. I am a program director at CSP, and as a way of introduction, CSP is a large nonprofit in Orange County, and so we are also the victim witness service provider. So you may know that in LA, for example, the victim witness office is actually staffed from the district attorneys, and that is how it works throughout most of the state of California. So the victim witness office is staffed by a victim advocate who is hired by the DA staff. Orange County is one of only 2 or 3 in the entire county where the victim witness program is actually provided and implemented by a nonprofit. So this gives us a lot of advantages and some disadvantages, but one of the advantages that we're able to carry through in just about everything that we do is that what this means is that we have over 40 years of a private-public partnership in the county, so we are used to working with each other. Even if we as individual staff members aren't used to, our agencies have been working with each other for over 40 years. So for me to have a collaboration with a district attorney staff, or for me to have a collaboration with a sergeant at a police department, it is not, we get to cheat a little bit. We don't have to start from the beginning. We get to tap into sort of the legacy that we already have, and people already work with each other. So I will share a little bit about what we're doing in Orange County. And know that it was, it took a really long time to get there, but when we walked in, it was already, the foundation was already laid for this collaboration and this multidisciplinary approach that I think everyone across the country has agreed is really the best way to provide practices and supportive services to victims of all types of crime. So I do oversee the human trafficking program. I do not provide direct assistance myself. I have 3 staff that provide the direct assistance. We also have a task force administrator, and I'll talk a little bit more about the different functions of the task force, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of context. I actually come from the anti-sexual assault movement, and when we began doing the human trafficking work, as I'll describe in a little bit, we really built a lot of what we're doing and a lot of how we were preparing to provide services based off of our the work of the sexual assault movement. We are also the Rape Crisis Center in Orange County, so we just thought we're just going to duplicate everything and adjust, accordingly. And as we found out very quickly, the clients that we're working with they don't look a lot like our sexual assault clients in a way that we were prepared for. As a matter of fact, they're definitely more parallel to the experiences and services needed for our domestic violence clients. So we had to do a really quick adjustment in how we're providing services. So I sort of came into it because this was my work and this is what we thought it was going to look like, and it changed and we all just changed with it. So I do want to start with the basics. I am going to explain what human trafficking is, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. I'll give a little bit of a contextual scope of work. I didn't bring statistics for several reasons. Mostly I was hoping you as clinicians, most of you probably wouldn't care about the statistics, so that gave me a good excuse to cut that slide out. But human trafficking is so new compared to the types of victim services that we've been providing over the decades that the statistics, the sources from the statistics are really difficult to get behind because we're doing a lot of guesswork right now. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act didn't come into our lives until the year 2000. Orange County's been doing the work longer than many people in the country, and we began in 2004, and not really in full earnest until 2008. And so getting numbers to reflect the scope of the problem is really, it's just too early to do that. So for human trafficking, the definition for the basic terms, I have this slide and I have a more complicated slide. So for those of you who like it simple, okay, it's forcing someone to do labor or commercial sex through the use of force, coercion, or other means. I said or other means because there are a whole legal list of words that could describe those other means. And that list includes fraud, debt bondage, and some other fancy legal terms that mean nothing to me as a victim service provider. Let me go ahead and move on. So what we've done is, because of Proposition 35, the state of California now mirrors the federal government laws. Not in every single way, but for all intents and purposes, federal law for sex trafficking and federal law for trafficking in general, and state law for trafficking in general really mirror each other. So we don't have to have long slides about the differences anymore. So again, this is made as simple as possible from a very, very robust legal code. But for labor trafficking, this is forced labor or services which were the means used were force, fraud, or coercion. And that is the same for adults and minors. And for the state of California and the federal government, minors are under the age of 18. So we're just talking 17 and younger or 18 and older. And really what I wanted to make sure that people got from the slide is the difference between labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And as you can see, for sex trafficking, if you are a minor, there is no requirement for force, fraud, or coercion to be identified. So if you are under the age of 18, involved in commercial sex, you are a potential human trafficking victim. If you are the person having sex or pimping that person out, you are a trafficker. Even if that 17-year-old walked up to a 25-year-old and said, I would like to work out on the streets, I need someone to help me post my images on Backpage or Redbook, I need you to help me out, can you make this happen? And it was, quote, her idea. Still, in legal terms, she's a sex trafficking victim because consent is not required. It does impact how things are prosecuted. There are stronger penalties for pimping or trafficking a minor if you can show force, fraud, and coercion, but you can still be prosecuted for pimping or trafficking a minor even if force, fraud, or coercion cannot be identified. So really, this is eliminating the concept of teen prostitutes, right? This is really eliminating that. And this causes a lot of complexity with providing services. This causes a lot of complexity for our law enforcement and our prosecutors. And because this is so new, Proposition 35 just going into action in January, which the biggest difference, in my opinion, is that in January, that force, fraud, and coercion being eliminated. That happened in January. That always was the case for the federal government, but it was not for the state of California until Prop 35. So now, every county and every jurisdiction is making adjustments about how they're going to be providing services. This causes a lot of debate about placement. So if you've got a 16-year-old and you can't charge her for prostitution and book her in juvenile hall, then where do you put her? Every county has been working and addressing that very differently. And I will talk about it again a little bit later when I talk about our task force. But our model is a case-by-case model. Sorry, this microphone is actually hindering me. So we do a case-by-case model. Everybody that walks into our door, we assess them just as an individual because we did begin with a county protocol. We began with a CSP victim service manual, and within the first 2 months, we actually balled both of them up and just threw them in the trash because it wasn't working for several reasons. And we'll talk about it a little bit more, but a 14-year-old girl who has been on the streets since she was 11, and her home had addiction in it, or she experienced domestic violence. She'd been in and out of the system, run away from foster care, and now we've come upon her at 14 years old. This is a different experience and a different need than the 16-year-old who has a two-parent family who got on the internet, met a boyfriend who's 30 in Texas and went off to meet him, and he turned around and put her out on the street. These are two different service provision needs. Not to mention the differences between a foreign national who is undocumented and doesn't have any support in this country. I mean, you can just imagine that it became very quickly evident that we couldn't have a set. We even got rid of our intake form that ask the following questions so we could figure out what we needed, because they were really completely different. And we gave up on all of that and decided case by case basis. And our law enforcement has agreed to do the same, especially since January, since at least in Orange County, the city of Anaheim, who we work closest with, their city attorney and the district attorney's office has informed Anaheim, we're not going to prosecute, we're not going to do anything if you book a person for prostitution who's a juvenile. We're not going to pursue the case. And so law enforcement, at least the chief of Anaheim, is saying, well, then I don't want my guys booking people for prostitution, because if nothing's going to happen, then this is a waste of our time. You need to figure out something else. And so now we're struggling with what is that something else? We do try things, literally try things. We get a client, we all sit around in a room and try to figure out what should we do with this particular client in this particular scenario. And we do reflect upon what we've done in the past, but every individual is so different that we can't just base it on our experience. Right now, we have a client who came to us as a perpetrator, and that's how we knew her. She was prosecuted, she was put in jail, she was out on probation, and while out on probation, she was trafficked, landed back at the police department as a trafficking victim. One of the law enforcement officers says, I actually think we know this girl. So then we all had to sit down as a group and decide, well, now what do we do? Do we provide services to this young lady who is still on probation for a sex trafficking perpetration, but now undeniably is a sex trafficking victim? What can we do? What should we do? How are we going to work this program? For her, we did decide, I checked with my funder, to be fair, we did decide to treat her just as any other victim of a crime. And we obviously are not putting her in the same shelter as some of our other clients. We're being very careful about how we're providing the services in conjunction with our other clientele, but we are providing services. And it's sort of hit or miss, because she's on probation still, which means anything, literally anything that she does, wrong, she's liable to, she's got some legal responsibilities. And so we've had these very uncomfortable, but very, I think, very positive conversations with our advocates in the district attorney's office, where we're now advocating for a young lady who may have smoked pot over the weekend. Right? That is not our job. That is not where we sit most comfortable. But we're advocating, it's just pot. She's got no coping skills. Her shelter, this is what's happening at her shelter. She came back and told us that's what she did. That's how we know. We're there advocating for this with the DA's office. And so this is a really positive experience, I think, but it's just, we're trying it. And we have had some very successful experiences with our youth shelters, for example. We have had 2 young ladies picked up who were under the age of 18. We had a social worker involved, and there were both moms up in Northern California. There was an assessment made and determined that, yes, going back home was the best course of action. So with law enforcement and the DA's office, we had to sit and talk about, are you okay with us putting them in the youth shelter? They can run from a youth shelter. We don't think that they're going to. We've done some training on the stages of change with our law enforcement officers. But look, she's in the action phase. This is going to be fine. Let us give this a try. And they did agree.
I'm wondering whether we could try it without and
Sure.
see if everybody can hear. If it's a problem, then if you can't hear, just raise your hand so we
I don't know how to turn it off, so. Throw it. Do you want me to kick it and see if that works? Okay, well good, because that makes me be able to do this. So, where was I? The two young ladies, and so they did agree. We had a very long conversation about this because this was a big case opportunity for our law enforcement partners, and they did not want to lose their two best victims/witnesses. So they're very wary of this. And then also they're going to go back home to Northern California, so our victim advocacy is going to be limited. And so they were very concerned about this. But we tried it. There was no real reason other than fear of losing a good witness. And we were able with our partners to sit down and say, come on, they're 16. They can go home. This is the perfect scenario that we can try. Good news, we did put them in the shelter. They stayed there for the 2 days that it took us to get both moms on a train to come down to Orange County to pick them up. They both went back up to Northern California, and the case is still pending, but the girls are still there. They're still with mom. It hasn't all been roses and sunshine. They have had a lot of mental health issues. We've had 2 different suicide attempts. But they are in the most supportive place that we can all provide to them, and are thriving right now. This is over a year and a half now. So I'm gonna knock on whatever this material is. We haven't really heard from them in 4 or 5 months. So no news is really fantastic news, and we were able to connect them with local resources and mental health professionals up in Northern California. So that is fantastic, but we have had several times where we've had girls run from the youth shelter, never to be heard from again, 15 years old, and nobody knows where they are, everybody feeling icky about that. We've had a couple of young ladies just flat out refuse to complete the intake and walk out the door, and the youth shelter nor victim advocates have the ability to hold them down and keep them there. So we're calling people saying she's walking down the street right now. She's literally walking away from me. I actually had one of my advocates call. They are amazing young ladies. They're amazing professionals, and very rarely do they ever get really upset or act in crisis. And she called, she's like, it's like a romantic movie. She's walking away, and she's like, nobody loves me. And I'm like, come back. And she's like, but I'm not good for anything. She's like, yes, you are. She's like, I can't get her back. So, there's a lot of good, a lot of bad, and a lot of trial and error. But I think the theme of everything that we can share in Orange County is our multidisciplinary model and our collaborative approach. Because I have said a couple of times, we all got together and talked about that. And that we all is a victim advocate from CSP or the Salvation Army. We partner with the sister agency, and their expertise is in foreign nationals, so we access them and they're part of our team. We have law enforcement on our team. We have 2 deputy district attorneys on the team. We have a designated social worker also on our team for folks under the age of 18. And we literally will get together in the police department or over the phone and argue about what we're gonna do about people. But we travel together, we train together, we have a lot of respect for each other, and everybody knows everyone's perspective, right? And we almost kind of know what they're gonna say. I'm gonna go into a room, I'm the victim advocate, I'm the voice of that youth or that adult. I'm gonna come in and I'm probably gonna tell you she wants to go home and she wants her damn phone back. That's probably what I'm gonna say. The social worker is focused on the what's in the best interest of the child. If there's an adult, we don't have a social worker there. But what's in the best interest of the child is what our social worker is doing. Law enforcement just wants to get the bad guy. They just want information to get the bad guy or bad girl. And the district attorneys wants enough information to prosecute a case and wants to know that their witnesses are going to cooperate. So we all already know what's going to happen. So even though we're arguing and debating, it's not like we're shocked about what's happening. We're just trying to, you know, process it out loud and see if we can land in a particular place. But we already know really where people are going to come from. So if we don't act surprised, then you can really get much further. You know, no one should be surprised that I'm going to go in there and say she wants to go home. They're like, you know, the perpetrator is not apprehended, it's unsafe. No, she can't have her phone because there's evidence on there. But they're not going to act surprised when I go in there and say those two things, because that's my job. Everybody knows that and respects that. And I think we've made a lot of progress, and I feel we just had a promotion. See, I say us, and it's not even me. Anaheim Police Department had a promotion. Our sergeant, who then became the lieutenant, is now moved on to a different assignment. And I think at the last event that we spoke at, he said a few words to conclude our panel. And I told him and the audience, honestly, this lieutenant is the best human trafficking advocate in Orange County. I mean, because when I say it, it's no surprise. That's my job, that's what I do, that's my wheelhouse. But when you have a law enforcement officer who that is not his job, be able to explain to anybody that, hey, these people, you know, this is different. This is not prostitution. We're talking about people who are being exploited. A lot of harm is happening, and we need to come together as a community to do something about it. You know, a lieutenant saying that, like if I didn't know him, I would have, you know, keeled over and fainted. But this is 2010 when I first met that particular individual. We sat down at a table and we said, we have this great plan. We're going to do this victim-centered approach. And he said that what he heard is, so you want me to get prostitutes off the street, sit them down and say, tell me who your pimp is, and you think that's going to work? And I said, yes. And even though you don't know this has actually been happening for decades in the sexual assault movement, for decades in the domestic violence movement. If you treat people with respect and acknowledge that there is trauma and start from there, you are going to get a lot further than hauling her in, putting handcuffs on her, calling her a bitch and a hoe, and making fun of her for not having money. Have you asked why she doesn't have any money? Let me give you some questions. And, you know, as a law enforcement officer, he does what he's told. His command staff says you're doing this project, so it's fine, he's going to do the project. But it did not take very long at all for all of the law enforcement officers involved in the project to see it very, very quickly, how effective it can be. I don't need to explain it to you, you know that it is effective. So you're finally out. Okay, so trafficking and smuggling, I just like to make sure people know this because I don't want anyone to leave a space where I was at and say trafficking and smuggling are the same thing. It's one of the things that is one of my hot button issues. Smuggling is a crime. Smuggling is not human trafficking. They're not the same thing. Smuggling is basically a crime against the nation. So if you are crossing one border, if you are crossing a border and you're doing it illegally, smuggling. So smuggling down in Orange County, well in LA, could look a lot like, you know, paying a coyote to get someone over to the United States. Oftentimes it's consensual. You know, they want to pay someone to get into this country, and doesn't need to, and it requires movement. You have to go across a border for there to be smuggling. The human trafficking does not require any movement at all. I can walk outside and stand in my front yard and be trafficked from my front yard. I can be trafficked from my bedroom. I don't have to go anywhere. I'll show you in just a second. Almost always there is movement because that has been the nature of what we are seeing at least, but it requires no movement. And this is a crime against a person and requires force, fraud, or coercion, unless you're a minor involved in sex trafficking, and where human smuggling often is consensual. Okay, so we have found human trafficking victims in just about every industry you can think of. I think many of them are obvious. Maybe some of those industries that you haven't thought of is we've definitely had labor trafficking victims in elderly care facilities. We attempted to do a human trafficking case on a car wash down in Orange County, and that did not meet the elements according to our law enforcement partners, but they did partner with the Department of Labor and pursue labor exploitation issues. You know, not getting paid on time, not getting paid overtime, no breaks, not getting paid minimum wage, those sorts of things. So we were able to address it through labor exploitation. It didn't quite reach trafficking that we could prove, at least. So definitely you can find it just about anywhere. And yes, it does happen. So this is the part where I don't have statistics, but I just wanted to give you some regional information. Please, thank you. So this is just Orange County. Now, we haven't updated our maps in at least a year. I think this one is 2 years old. So this is just to give you an idea of the victims who are identified as being trafficked in Orange County, the different locations that they have come from just within the state. Next. And this is the country. And again, this hasn't been updated since 2012. So we've got folks from Alaska. We have a recent victim who came from Nebraska, a lot of Texas, a lot of Arizona. We've got Utah, Vegas, you name it. And this is across the globe. And I think you should bear in mind I'm talking about Orange County. So, I mean, reflect on what you think about Orange County, and it's probably not the hotbed of trafficking that you would have you would have said, Orange County, that's the place with the problem. So this is not the place with the problem. I think we did receive the first enhanced collaborative model trafficking grant for the U.S. The Office of Victims of Crime and the Bureau of Justice Assistance got together and provided federal money to 3 pilot agencies across the country to say, hey, can you collaborate and address human trafficking, all human trafficking, not just sex trafficking, not just adults or minors, just everything. So if you can show us that you have a place that can do all of this work, we've got money for 3 different places. So we did apply, really kind of as practice. We got together and said, we should put this together. We've got a great collaborative model. I don't know what our numbers would look like, but we should put this together. And it was, I say this all the time, it was the very first grant email that I ever received that said, congratulations, you got the grant. And I said, oh, shit. Oh, no. Somebody pull that thing up and see what we said we were going to do. I mean, we were just really surprised, and our understanding is that it was the collaborative model that we had. It's that we sit in the DA's office but are our own personnel. We sit in the police department but have our own personnel. That we really literally work together. The case manager for the Salvation Army has her own supervisor, her own human resources, but my grant pays her salary and benefits. And so, I mean, we literally work together, and we had one Salvation Army staff person who was in our office so often that the front desk receptionist didn't know that she wasn't working for us for the first year. She said, she doesn't work here? I said, no, she doesn't. She doesn't even work for this agency. She said, oh, I had no idea. I said, oh yeah, she just sits in the intern cubicle when she's here. She's like, okay. So I did Google. Usually if I do an Orange County presentation, I Google, human trafficking in Orange County and do some screenshots and what's in the news. So I understand that you all are actually going to be honoring Sergeant Hooker and his team for the human trafficking work that he's been doing. And so I was very pleased to hear that. I actually just Googled Long Beach and this had come up, so I thought that would be kind of fun to include. I know you'll be talking about it further next month. And I met Sergeant Hooker briefly. He attended a train-the-trainer workshop that we conduct. And the lieutenant I was talking to you about moments ago, Lieutenant Friesen, has worked with Sergeant Hooker and has really positive things to say. So I was really excited to hear that he's going to be honored here. So there's your own work being done. And I just pulled up one. I could pull up several. But I think this helps to introduce who the traffickers are. So you can't see all that well, but I've got 2, late 20s men and a woman here. All 3 of them were charged with trafficking and torture of one young lady. This actually, I think the Costa Mesa Police Department responded, but I think it's were a little confused as to what actual city it landed in. That case is still being dealt with, and the client is doing very well. Matter of fact, she's one of the clients that has had a really amazing turnaround. I was going to say, especially given what happened, but the case manager describes that sometimes, which may not be a surprise to you all, sometimes when our clients have really had an overt violent scenario, that is the trigger that gets people to think about, okay, I think I'm ready to not have this happen to me again. And so this was one of our worst as she walked in, but it is currently one of our best. And this just happened, I think, in June. What did it say? July. It just happened in July. So very quickly, she's very stable. She's doing a fantastic job. She's provided a lot of information to law enforcement. And again, I'm knocking that she's doing wonderful. So she's been relocated and is doing well.
Lita, do
Yes, ma'am.
you house the victims? You mentioned shelter.
That's a great question. No, CSP doesn't house the victims. However, we do have one of the youth shelters in Orange County. So if we have those two youths that were down in Orange County, we did house them at our Huntington Beach Youth Shelter for those 2 days. We work with an agency called Grandma's House of Hope. They are a nonprofit with a couple of different housing facilities. And so we, through our federal grant, pay for our clients to stay at that facility. They are not a human trafficking shelter, however. There's not a human trafficking shelter in Orange County at this moment. I have a couple of exceptions to that. They are a shelter for, I think their website says, hard to place women. And so they have contracts with, I think, a homelessness grant. They actually work with one of the hospitals, and they house women who are going through treatment for breast cancer, because you cannot go through treatment for cancer if you do not have a permanent residence. And there is a great number of women who don't have a quote permanent residence and are couch surfing. So they have a grant with a hospital to house these women for the duration of their treatment. So the good news is there's a place. The bad news is they are not trained for this. And we do have a lot of hit or miss, and not all of our clients are good fits, especially our young clients. And we have a lot of young clients. So we have a lot of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, and it is just not a good fit there. In their words, it's just a bunch of old women. They're like 30. So shelter has been very problematic. The Salvation Army does have an apartment for foreign nationals, but it's not a shelter service. It's literally an apartment. So if you have people who need services, that is not an option. And we have found that a lot of our foreign national clients are okay with our apartment scenario and other housing options, but our domestic, our U.S. citizens, really are not. I think I had a victim advocate who just moved on to a different program, and I asked her, help me describe this position to the next person so that I can make a good hire. And she said, well, what you need to know, in my opinion, is she used to be a victim witness advocate. So she said, in my old job, I would meet people and they were going about their lives, and then something awful happened to them. And so my job is to help them understand the criminal justice process, what's gonna happen, do a little crisis intervention, and tap into their existing resources. And she says, the clients that I've worked with since I've been here are not like that. They were not going through their lives and something bad happened. They literally don't remember it being any different. They have no resources to tap into. I'm trying to teach them one coping skill. I'm trying to teach them grounding techniques. She's like, these are people with multiple traumas, with very little resources, and really a despairing look into the future. And she's like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. These are people, no matter what age they are, that don't have a lot to fall back on. And luckily, there are some survivors of trafficking who are beginning to speak out. Again, because this is so new, there's not like, a resource of survivors that people can turn to. And so they also have very little access to seeing that it's possible to change, to seeing a possible positive future. And so our victim advocates said, you need to make sure this person knows, like, this is not crisis intervention. This is intensive case management, creating resources out of nothing, and really a lot of hand-holding and a lot of listening. And again, we thought, sexual assault trauma, especially for our sex trafficking victims, and almost without exception, the clients that we're working with, like, the sexual assault trauma is an irrelevant issue to them. That is not one of their top 10 priorities. They're like, in their mind, it's so normalized that, like, to address rape trauma syndrome or any type of issues surrounding sexual assault is like, well, I don't know. That's my entire sexual experience. I don't understand that as traumatic. I have more trauma about, what I'm going to do without my perpetrator, that my parents don't love me and don't want me back, that I have nowhere to go. Like the fact that I've been serially raped for 5 years is really a non-issue right now. Can I deal with that later? And we were just not prepared for that, So these are our numbers. For those of you math geniuses in the room, you'll notice that they all don't match. We had 226 clients that we provided services throughout the year 2013. So this is from our 2014 report. We were reporting on everything that happened throughout the year 2013. And you can go on to ochumantrafficking.org, and we do have our victim report for 2014 and 2013 if you're interested. So 179 sex trafficking victims and 36 labor trafficking victims does not add to 226 because the other folks were both or servile marriages, which at the time we weren't categorizing it as either one. Now the federal government, our federal funder, has informed us to put them as as labor trafficking victims. So next year's will look different, but that's why the numbers don't match. And what I want to say is that I don't think this is the trend in Orange County. I don't want you to leave and think, oh my gosh, Orange County, sex trafficking, mostly US citizens, and almost all female. What I want you to know is that's what we're looking for. The cops are trained and as part of their proactive work is they're looking for young ladies who are being sex trafficked. So we are finding young ladies who are being sex trafficked. I think that if young English-speaking ladies, for that matter. So I think once our law enforcement has been able to work around how to get people into casitas, how to get people into massage parlors, how to get people into other type of labor industries, the numbers will change. This is just what we're looking for, and honestly, this is the low-lying fruit. This is, unfortunately, extremely easy. The lieutenant used to say that because this was a part of the vice unit before, so they had other jobs besides human trafficking, and the lieutenant would say if they were having a slow week, they would do a sex trafficking sting so that he would have something for his guys to do. Because he knew that if you go out there, you look, you're going to find a victim, you're going to find the perpetrator, you're going to have a case, you're going to have something to do. Super easy to find. So because I talk most about sex trafficking, because that is our experience, I did want to share that we do have experience with labor trafficking. So this is just one example. This was our very first actual high-profile case in Orange County. And this is Shaima Hall. I'll start with the good news. She's doing fantastic. She's a high school graduate. She's got a little baby, a wonderful job. She's doing great. She got a green card maybe 2 years ago now. So she's a really wonderful woman. She has come back and spoken at a few of our events. She was sold by her parents to another family to meet a debt, and that family in Egypt did come to the U.S. at some point and smuggled her in. Everybody knows smuggling now, right? They used a fake visa, said that she was her daughter. So she was living in a gated community in Irvine. Living in the garage, had a bucket for anything that she needed to do in the evening so she wouldn't have to come up into the house. She slept on a mattress and had one blanket. She could use on the mattress or on her, and her job was to take care of the children and clean the house. And she wasn't allowed to leave the house. She wasn't allowed to enter the door. She did not go to school. She was their house servant as a young child. We didn't come across her until she was 12, and no one was looking for her, right? But a neighbor actually called the authorities and said, "There's a little girl that lives next door. She does not go to school with the other 3 kids. I never see her out of the house except to take out the trash, and I'm starting to think something is not right in there." And the authorities did show up and did find her there. She didn't speak any English. They asked her if they were forcing her to do anything, to which she replied no. And she actually was in our social service program for over 2 years before she told her story to anyone. Her perpetrators were prosecuted. They did serve prison time. One of the defendants was deported. And like I said, she's doing very well. But that actually began our very first focus in Orange County, which was community awareness, because a neighbor was so alert to what was happening and called, this young lady was rescued. Had it not been for her, no one's going to see or know. No one would. So we started with making sure people knew, what are the signs, where can you call, what can you do? What happened to the family? Yes, the quote mom and dad. Yes, the mother and father were both prosecuted and went to prison. Yes.
Was she granted asylum?
She was not granted asylum. No. She went through some sort of immigration relief, but it wasn't asylum.
It would be a T visa, trafficking visa.
Yeah, this was the ICE case, first ICE case we did over there. And in this case, she got a green card. It was a juvenile visa.
Oh, juvenile visa. Yes. So there are T visas. We do get T visas for our clients. We've also obtained U visas for our clients, and we've also used VAWA for our clients. We usually just go with, the path of least resistance. Yes.
How was it that the one neighbor that reported her was wise enough to be observant? Because unfortunately, sometimes neighbors have the attitude, even though they know it, they go, "Oh, I'm afraid to get involved. What if there will be some retaliation?"
I have absolutely no idea. This woman just was concerned about a child that lived next door. This was before anyone really even heard of trafficking. She didn't call and say there's a human trafficking victim next door. She's like, there's a kid who I'm pretty sure doesn't go to school, and I'm starting to think that something is not right. Can someone check it out? Luckily, law enforcement and Child Protective Services were trained and did something about it. But the community member was just a concerned community member. Yes, ma'am.
I remember hearing her speak maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and if I'm remembering correctly, the neighbor had seen her like holding the towels for the other kids at the pool or something, like acting in a servant kind of capacity, and identified that was weird. And whether or not she had any sense that she was not part of that family, she just had the sense that why isn't this still getting to play?
Yeah.
Why is she the one kind of acting like a man?
Yeah, exactly. And that is one of the, I think, embarrassingly obvious things about human trafficking of minors, is that people really get tripped up on the term human trafficking. So I tell, if you're dealing with minors and human trafficking freaks you out, then don't even deal with that. This is child abuse. And I don't care what category you want to put it in or how you want to capture it. Law enforcement and the DA's office can do what they want to with it. But I think we all understand when children are being abused or neglected, and that this term is sometimes getting in the way. And that's why when we talk to law enforcement, we tell them, look, okay, if human trafficking is like tripping you up, then how about, statutory rape? Does that do anything for you? How about, like let me use a term that you like better. Okay, so because I know more about sex trafficking, I will share a little bit about what the traffickers have told us. So this is, these are 2 example traffickers that were identified in Orange County. And this is actually from a book. So this is from, not that I'm trying to encourage you to support his work, but it is from the book Pimpology, the 48 Laws of the Game. It is not even the best pimp book on the market, but it's the easiest one to quote. So these are just 3 example quotes from his book to help other people who want to be pimps know how to make money. Next page, please. And there are 48 laws. This is law number 5. Some of them are fascinating. Things about like how to accrue tax. I mean, just very very, very businesslike. So this is law number 5, titled "Prey on the Weak." And so these are some of these examples. Most hosts have low self-esteem for a reason. And down at the bottom, you have to tear someone's ego down to nothing before they will start to looking to you for salvation. They begin to see you as their hero, even if the weakness that you're rescuing them from is the one you created. This is from a man who did not graduate high school. His father was a pimp, so he became a pimp. And he thought he was so good at it that he would write a book to help other people become a pimp. And this is spot on, right? I mean, this is almost from a manual from, military boot camp, right? I mean, this is spot on. Yeah.
And this book was sold on Amazon.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can get it on Amazon right now.
It was sold out. It was sold out. It was bought by normal people like you.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon right now. I didn't bring these blurbs, but I also, because it's my job, I was Googling pimp information on the internet, and I came across the fascinating website, pimpfeet.com. And also, so this is a technical assistance website for pimps. And so you can actually go on and ask him questions, and he'll answer, like a Yahoo Answers page. And he has games, like if you have your bitch hold a sign that says pimpfeet.com and post it on your Facebook, you could enter into free technical assistance with me. And pages of information. And one of his pages I use for law enforcement, and it's just an excerpt that says to other people something basically that hoes aren't out there looking for you. You have to find them. No bitch is out there looking for someone to help them make money. You have to create that. And so I use that to help law enforcement at least capture the concept that girls are not walking around, generally speaking, saying, I have a great idea. I'm 15. I know a great idea on how to make money. I'm going to do this, and this is going to be how I'm going to survive. That's not happening. The Polaris Project estimates that 1 of 3 teen runaways that end up homeless on the street are approached by a trafficker within 48 hours. Men like this who are looking for vulnerable girls to make money off of. And not all men, to be fair. We have had our very fair share of female traffickers down in Orange County. So who are the traffickers? There's everyone. We've had mothers trafficking out their children. We have first cousins trafficking out their cousins as part of what they do to make money for their gang. The victims have a lot of similar vulnerable paths, but not all of them. Our traffickers have really been just about anybody. Okay, so contributing factors I don't think is a surprise to anyone, but what I want to do is I have an 8-minute video that I want to get to. So I think it's maybe, let's do one more slide. Yeah, okay, so indoctrination. So I also show this to law enforcement to help. It's called The Making of a Girl. It's by GEMS. They are really the premier service provider of sex trafficking in the country. They're in New York. And so this particular film is called The Making of a Girl. It's to help people see really how a girl gets made. So I'll come over here because it might be a little tricky.
And he's stuffing his pockets with the $1,000 that he made. You're 12 years old and you're living with your moms, and your mom's just struggling because she didn't think that life was really going to work out like this for her, and she doesn't have a man around, and the men that are around haven't always been that great. Sexual abuse is becoming kind of normal for you, and you think that other people don't have secrets that are as bad as you, and maybe you try to at school and they haven't really heard you, or maybe they just haven't had time to listen to you. And so you're seeing these girls on the videos, and they're so pretty and they're so sexy, and so your way at 12 of escaping into this fantasy world is to think about what it must be like to be one of these girls, and you know the adult men already look at you, and you wonder how you can kind of use that.
I was just a child.
one day you're coming out of school and there's a guy outside in a Cadillac and he's nice looking. I mean, he's got the baseball cap and the jeans and the Timbs, and he tells you how pretty you are and you know how pretty your hair looks. And it's been a while since anybody even really noticed anything about you. And for the first time, you feel like somebody's really interested in you, because now all of a sudden he's asking you about your dreams and your hopes and where your father's at. And he says that he can be a daddy to you.
I shouldn't have depended on. I was dependent on for support.
And so that night he takes you to a club and he puts you up on the stage and he gives you a few drinks and there's men throwing dollars at you. And it's scary, but all the time you're just looking at his face in the back of the room and he's like, you know, go ahead, baby girl, go ahead. You're doing it for daddy. And you're feeling proud because nobody's ever said that to you. And so then that night he tells you that there's more stuff that you've got to do. And he takes you into a room and there's a man there and he tells you to strip and fitness is something you'll never do. And yet, there's a part of you that already knew how to do this, because that's what your stepfather's been doing to you all these years before. And so you turn that trick, and it's like a part of you that's dying inside. And so you come out of the club that night, and you get in the car, and you know, he tells you, you did a good job tonight, sweetie. And he's stuffing his pockets with the $1,000 that you made. And right now, you're happy.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was dependent on for support.
And you feel like this is the best that it's ever going to get. And everything else in your life has prepared you for this moment. All the sexual abuse, all the neglect, all the drama, all the pain, all the trauma has prepared you for tonight when you stepped across a line that you always thought you'd never really quite step across. And you don't realize that night what it'll be like to be on the track and get raped. And you don't realize that daddy isn't really going to protect you. You don't realize what it's like to have a gun out to get hit that night. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you catch your first STD. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you first come home and daddy beats you for the first time because you didn't make enough money. You don't know what it's going to be like to have cops offer to trade sex with you in exchange for not being arrested. And then sometimes you do that and they'll still lock you up anyway. You don't know what it's like to sit up in jail and know that you just made $1,500 for your pimp last night, but he won't come down and put $200 bail on just to get you out a few days early. You don't know what it's like to walk down the street at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're just getting off work and people are starting their day and they see you and they know what you do and they look at you and they'll pay back. You just don't feel like you belong in that world anymore. And you don't know what it's like to feel like you lost part of yourself along the way and to feel like you'll never leave. And no matter how many times you try to leave, he'll always find you and catch you. But that night, all you care about is the fact you're riding in a Cadillac, and you're eating McDonald's, and you're listening to 50, and you got this one man who you really think loves you sitting right by your side.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Slaughter had said the average age of entry is 12 years old.
Yes.
The way I understand numbers, that means there are a lot of 8-year-olds. Is that
Yes.
right?
Well,
So then,
I-
yes, in LA County, we've had as young as 8 years old.
I will fall back to my uncomfortableness with being able to stand by statistics on human trafficking. So that's what I will say. This film is also a few years old, but absolutely we have had very young sex trafficking clients. In Orange County, we don't keep statistics about first entry into prostitution, but we did do a subjective review with our case managers and ask them, of the girls that you happen to know when their first entry into prostitution was, what was that age so that we would have something to share. And for us, that it was between 15 and 17. But those are the people that we knew. And again, that's the average. So that means there was a great deal of folks that were under the age of 15 to 17 in order to make it an average. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of statistics, are there any statistics that are good?
Well,
It seems so discouraging.
yeah, oh, you mean positive? Well, I thought you meant like valid. Positive. Well, this is what I would say, is that our 2014 victim report does include an assessment that we did. It was an internal assessment, so again, we did that ourselves. We tried to make it as objective as possible, so what we did is the case managers were given a matrix of success. So we had different categories like housing, mental health, social support, employment or education, those types of things. And each matrix was said, like, they're considered in crisis if they are homeless. They're considered vulnerable if they're couch surfing, stable, thriving. So we did have a matrix to try to make it as objective as possible. And the victim report does show the results, and it was very, very encouraging, especially at the beginning, because we did an assessment on intake, and then 3 weeks later, and almost immediately, many of the categories were out of in crisis. So, I mean, just immediately, if you can give them and get them in shelter, we have the ability to give them a legal service provider. Hook them up with mental health if that's what they're interested in. Even some of the really basics, like they come to us without ID. I mean, they're maybe 15 or 30. They have no identification. They have no identification. They can't get anywhere, even if they wanted to get somewhere. They don't have their birth certificate, have no idea how to get it, and we're doing that type of work. And that was not what we were prepared to do. Now we're very good at getting photo ID for someone who has never had a photo ID. You would think that is freaking impossible, by the way. Thanks to a really great partner at a sports facility who would take pictures of clients. I mean, we were being very innovative because people are like, we need a photo ID. So she's been on the street. She doesn't have anything. She hasn't been at school. I don't even have a school picture. It's like real basics. So very immediately, they moved out of in crisis. We've had clients that were with us for a year, and they were in our top 2 categories, thriving or stable. So service provision, well-funded service provision, it is proving to be extremely successful, but it's still early because I think a year, I think I'm talking to the choir, a year is early. And there's a lot of ebbs and flows because somewhere around 6 months, we lose people, people go into crisis, they don't think that they have to do their own shelter, and now they're going to work and they're doing job interviews. We had a poor young lady who was so prepared for her job interview. She had a lot of skills that we could put on paper, which is not always the case for our clients. And she went in and we called, how did it go? And she said, I don't think I got the job. I said, well, what happened? You were all prepared. And she said, well, I know I prepared, but when they asked me why, to explain my gap in employment between this time and this time, I said what you told me to say, but they asked me to tell me a little bit more about that. And I said, okay, what did you say? She said, I cried. And, she had a terrible week. She was like, she really fell into despair. I'm never going to make it. I'm never going to get a job. I'm never going to get anywhere. So, it's a long, long road. But that particular assessment, I think, is very positive news. That well-funded support with a collaborative team is very successful. And those of you involved in wraparound services, you already know that. If you can wrap people around with the resources that they need, you can be really, really successful. I'm going to show one more slide. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious, what advice did you offer for the gap in employment?
You know what? That's such a great question. I'm going to have to find out the answer. We actually have an agency that helped her prepare for the job. It's called Working Wardrobes down in Orange County, and they helped her build a resume. They did practice interviews with her. But that's not the first time someone's asked me that, so I'm going to need to find out the answer. I don't know. And that was another thing of, collaborative work. My victim advocate was like, do you remember my job interview? You don't want me, you don't want me preparing somebody else. And so we have some wonderful partners that have been able to step in and do that work. So everyone knows what this is, right? I actually got this off of a pimp website. So Harmony Dust is the one who posted it, and she does human trafficking work. But this is by a gentleman by the name of R.J. Martin, who has requested that he be cited. And this is on his, he has an article that, I forgot the title, how to use Maslow's hierarchy to make the most money as a pimp, something like that. And you can see, and this is not a college graduate, this is not maybe even a high school graduate, but they're very good at knowing how to manipulate people. And really, he just talks through in his article, how to meet these needs. If you can find someone who is low in some of these needs, you can meet that, and then you will own them, and they can make money for you. And so he talks, about how to access that. But you can see that even in just that 8-minute video, right? We had a young 12-year-old example of, shout out what some of the vulnerabilities were that you heard.
Child sexual abuse.
Child sexual abuse.
Lack of attachments.
Lack of attachments. Support. Okay. And very immediately the pimp offered compliments, offered some food, offered encouragement, said he was proud of her. That's something she hadn't seen before. There's a lot of really fascinating things I think that happen in those 8 minutes. But I think the most fascinating thing for me is when she says, I was told you have to do one more thing, and when I was told to strip, I realized I actually know how to do this. Everything that has happened to me has prepared me for this. I already know what to do. And that, the first time I heard that, really broke my heart, because I think it helps lay people to see, how does an average person, agree to take their clothes off and have sex with someone? And that gives a glimpse into how that can happen, how someone can be prepared for that. So in your PowerPoint presentation, we did break down some examples of our own clients on how, in comparison to Maslow's hierarchy, to give you a feeling of what we've seen for both labor and sex trafficking victims. And so that is there for your perusal. Again, ochumantrafficking.org has our victim service report that has our assessment.